You would think with any contract providing services to the public, there would be an elected official to provide public input and oversight to this process. We have reached out to the mayor's office, the speaker's office, the city's contract committee, and the controller's office to get access to an online copy of the draft of the contract and to call for a hearing. We either received no response or were told they do not have the power or responsibility to do that. This was a 34-year, $1.4 billion unprecedented contract. In essence, there was no vehicle for the public to have input into a contract for public services, and in this specific case, services that also affected the lives, the care, and welfare of our shelter animals for the next 34 years. This was an insult on the democratic process. There needs to be elected official oversight of the contract process, and we believe in cases like this, the public advocate should have the authority to work in public interest, and we want to thank David Eisenbach for having the vision to support this.
Thank you very much. My name is Dr. David Eisenbach. I teach history, and I'm running for a public advocate. The issue today that we're discussing is very near to my heart. Number one, animal rights. Number two, good government. A 34-year contract done without transparency raises serious questions. Now, as a historian, I can tell you, the Founding Fathers specifically designed our democracy to fight this lack of transparency. Their assumption was if you did not have transparency for government action, there was corruption. Now, we don't know whether there was or there wasn't, but that's the problem. You can't have a lack of public input on a huge contract like this for a vulnerable subset of our population, in this case, the animals, without there being serious questions involved. And that is why we are here today. All we're looking for is for some community input on these major contracts and for transparency. And we want to make sure the animals are taken care of. And regardless of our age, we're very concerned with their issue. Thank you very much, Marilyn. I am so delighted to have your support of the Voices for Animal Shelters. And I'm very honored here to have Noam Cohen-Weinberg, a young, concerned animal rights activist here, who also wants to say a few words on why this is so important for all of us. Go ahead, Noam.
This is really important to me because I have 2 cats at home, and I love them dearly. Yesterday, I looked at the ACC's at-risk list, or kill list, and I saw 8 beautiful cats and dogs on that list. One of the cats on that list was on that list, on that kill list, just because that cat was anxious. And another cat was on that list because that cat didn't like being held for a long period of time. That is awful, and that is disgraceful, and it is obvious that we need to fix our shelter system in the city.
Thank you, Noam. This issue of how we categorize our animals and how they wind up on the kill list was something that I learned from a very important voice for animals in New York City, and that is Craig Seeman. Craig, would you like to say a few words here?
Thank you. Thank you. Since the previous contract expired, we've been looking for an avenue to voice our opinions because we feel the shelter system needs to be reformed. As others have said, they're killing healthy and treatable animals. And yet we have no vehicle to input the contents of the contract, the euthanasia, the protocols involved. There's no way to access that. There's no way to say, we want these points revised within the contract. We're also concerned about the fact that New York City is transferring a large sum of money to animal care and control for the first time to privately purchase the shelter rather than the city making the purchase. And despite that large sum of money transferred for a private real estate purchase, there's no public input. We need shelter reform in New York City, and we need to have a voice to do that. And right now, the voice is the public advocate candidate, and that's David Eisenbach.
Thank you very much, Craig. Now I'd like to introduce another great voice for animal rights in New York City, Nancy Sliwa.
So when I first heard about the 34-year contract, as an attorney, I think it's incredibly unconscionable, and I really couldn't imagine how it would happen that any contract would be given the go-ahead for 34 years. That being said, the animal care and control in the city, they haven't made the wisest moves when it comes to animals to date. Now, the politicians and who currently are in office who either turned a blind eye to information they already have, this is stuff that's come to light time and time again in terms of the inefficiencies that are happening. I mean, even Scott Stringer had done a report which was equivalent to an expose calling out every inefficiency that occurred, and the fact that they're not the only game in town. We don't need to work with them. They're not doing anything out of the goodness of their heart. We're giving them taxpayer dollars to fund this, and they're doing a horrible job. So now you have the clear conclusion, which is that it's probably a more of a corruption type influence. You have people who are getting paid who have zero interest whatsoever in animal issues. So whether it's the consultants who are seeking out sites that never get built, or it's individuals who are actually starting to give they're not interested in fixing the animals on the front end to keep the population down, but they're perfectly happy with doing so a day or two before they euthanize them. So they're completely missing the point. They're doing something that doesn't make any sense. So now you have the opportunity to say, well, what is really the role of government? And you start realizing that there's a very corruptive influence going on here, because when government steps in to care for a public need, it's because it's not being catered to. Here you have the perfect result of communities getting involved, individuals, people who are on their own, who are caring for the animals, who are doing the right thing, and somehow they're getting shut out because we're continuing to fund this monster of the animal care and control. So to say that you want to give them a 34-year contract is to turn your back on all of the hard work of the vibrant animal rights community throughout the state. This is a perfect example of people coming together and solving the need of government, and without actually being able to attack that bureaucracy. They're so entrenched, they'll never want to let go. They have to slowly be taken out of the equation. You should start shifting over the funds to the groups who actually know what they're doing. And again, there's no loss. They can be an oversight, they can maybe distribute the funds, but why keep them in charge when they really don't have a handle over the animal rights issues, and clearly they're asleep at the wheel. They don't even want to pay attention for the next 34 years. That's how much attention they want to give to this.
Well put.
Thank you, David.
Next, I'd like to introduce Judy Lustgarten.
Hello, how are you? If it can be better, and it can be, as it's been proven one by one across our country, then there's no other correct and moral choice. And it's all about motivation. It's about putting the proper people in the proper position with a proper plan, motivation, choice, and intention. And we need to get online here in New York City with that, because it is not happening here. We do not have the proper people in place. To pass a 34-year contract is never happened. It's never been heard of before. It's just out of this world. It's crazy. It's literally crazy, and it can't go on. We need to get an animal welfare agency created with the proper people in there. Certainly not the people that are in there now. And if Mario Merlino and Department of Health says veterinary and pest control, that says volumes. Those two words don't belong in the same category. And that's what's happening now in our city. That's the way it's run now. We need reform desperately, and it's time. It's time for the new regime.
And finally, Amy Marino would like to say a few words.
This contract is going to last, it's not even going to make most of our people's lifetimes. I mean, some people are not going to see how this benefits the animal in the long run. I mean, it might be, probably going to exceed mine. I'll probably make it 34 years. That's double my age. Yeah, that's double my age. That's double my age. But still, I mean, the way that this was handled without transparency, and it was like the secret, definitely wrong. These animals are on a kill list for being scared. I mean, if you're in a cage, abandoned by your owners or people you thought loved you, and in a cage, how would you feel? I'm sure they'd feel the same way. I mean, almost every animal, especially the dogs, mostly pit bulls, of course they're going to be scared, but the little dogs as well, and cats. I have a cat of my own, and he would be scared if someone held him for a long period of time. He doesn't like me holding him for a long period of time. He's 2 years old, and he was a rescue. He came from the streets, and I love him to death. I mean, he was a bit scared when I first got him, but now he loves me, and he's attached. He's a magnet. You give these animals time out of a cage, out of a shelter, and you could see what you could do. I had a rescue, he's no longer with us, from Brooklyn, and he was shy, he had some trust issues, but when you give an animal love, it shows, it speaks volumes. They can come out of their shell. I mean, this contract is it's unconscionable, and it's unfair to the animals and to us New Yorkers who have to pay for this out of city tax dollars. I feel that that's wrong. People should know about what's going on, and we need the right people in office to get the word out and to help these animals, because we don't have it here. Lord knows we don't have it here, and it's very heartbreaking and disturbing to me how animals don't have rights in a city where we all fight for our own rights, but no one's fighting for animal rights, and yet we'll say we're animal lovers, and no one knows at the ACC what they do a lot of times. They'll just say, oh, it's a care center, it's a shelter, they'll get care. That's not the case. More people need to be aware of what goes on and the conditions and everything that takes place in the NYC ACC.
What we need at the end of the day is transparency. That is the only way in which we can preserve good government. In the case of animals, the fact of the matter is that New York City has fallen behind the times. New York City was always on the forefront of the great rights issues of our time. Civil rights, women's rights, LGBTQ rights, but we have fallen behind the times on animal rights. I am going to be a public advocate that is going to put animal rights at the forefront of my agenda. I'm going to appoint animal rights activists like Craig and Marilyn to be my liaisons to the animal rights community, to be the advocates for animal rights in the public advocate's office. That is the one way in which we're going to change our approach to our animal care in New York City. My name is David Eisenbach. We here are together in this fight against this contract. We just want transparency, we want good government, and most of all, we want to protect our animals. Thank you very much.